Sports is where I learned consistency and momentum from. Facts, and it's the stuff you can't see that make the biggest differences. They sent me a fire video. It's just like the KD one. The KD is what Machiavelli warned us about. It's something like that, but it's with Curry. It's Stephen Curry is what Galileo warned us about. And I'm very intrigued of what he says in this video or the way he spins it. So we're gonna get into
15-16 NBA season, and the Golden State Warriors are running through the
must die behind.
yes.
league like nothing
You the same
professional
way.
basketball has
That's
ever
real.
witnessed before. Steph Curry is standing 35 feet from the basket, well beyond the three-point line, well beyond what any serious basketball mind would call a reasonable shot. He catches the ball, barely takes a dribble, and rises into a jumper that should miss by 6 feet. It goes in. The crowd loses its mind.
Oh, what a shot from Curry!
This is not a fluke. This is a
This
structural
the
collapse of
second
everything the
KD
basketball
was like,
world
oh yeah,
believed it understood about
I'm
shooting
going to the
efficiency,
Warriors.
shot selection, and the
When they
physical
came back
limits of
3-1
what a
on his
human being
ass.
can
Say
do with a
Cam Wheel
basketball.
Daddy.
In 1632, Galileo Galilei published a
Was that
book
upset?
that got him placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. The book was called Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, and its central argument was simple but devastating. The universe does not work the way you think it does. The accepted wisdom of nearly 2,000 years, the Aristotelian model that educated men had built entire civilizations of thought around, was wrong. Galileo didn't just challenge a theory, he challenged the entire framework that people used to understand reality. He said that when you drop two objects of different weights, they reach the ground at the same time, which contradicted everything the scientific establishment had spent centuries insisting was true. The establishment didn't thank him for this, they prosecuted him. Because what Galileo was really warning the world about wasn't just physics, it was what happens when someone proves that a limitation you believed in was never actually a law at all. To understand what Curry represents, you have to understand the orthodoxy he walked into. The NBA by 2009 had already calcified around a set of beliefs about how winning basketball was played. You built your offense around a dominant big man or a slashing wing who could get to the rim. You used the three-point line as a supplement, a weapon for specific shooters in specific moments, not as the central architecture of your entire offensive system. Teams that shot too many threes were undisciplined. Coaches who encouraged deep pull-up jumpers from 30 feet were reckless.
With his
The
broad
analytics
ass.
community, which was supposed to challenge conventional wisdom, had actually reinforced a version of the orthodoxy by correctly pointing out that shots near the rim were more efficient than mid-range jumpers. The conclusion that most people drew from that data was that you attacked the basket and you stayed close to the basket. Nobody had accounted for what would happen if someone came along who could shoot
Cam,
from
what was it
35
like to
feet
watch Wilt
at
Chamberlain
54%
play?
efficiency. That player wasn't supposed to exist. Galileo's most important contribution to science wasn't any single discovery, it was his insistence that you had to measure things rather than simply reason
Bro, don't
about them
start,
from
bro.
first principles.
When you
Curry's
watch these
entire
videos,
career
you
is a
understand how
reputation.
sports are not just sports, but they are businesses and they are puzzles that you're watching.
Yes. Sports is where I learned consistency and momentum from. Facts, and it's the stuff you can't see that make the biggest differences. That's facts.
Of the basketball equivalent of this exact failure. Basketball scouts
From sports, you can see what it takes to be a leader. Like which people are really and truly leaders, and which people are just good at what they do. They not good at leading teams.
in the early 2000s didn't measure whether a 6'3" guard with chronic ankle problems could sustain shooting efficiency from extreme distance over a full career. They looked at him and reasoned about it based on what they believed they already understood about the game, and they decided he couldn't. The Golden State Warriors selected him in the draft after 6 teams had passed on him, teams that looked at his frame, looked at his ankle injury history, and concluded that the evidence in front of them pointed toward limitation.
2009 NBA Draft, the Golden State Warriors select Stephen Curry from Davidson College.
By 2012 and 2013, a healthier Curry was beginning to reveal something that didn't fit the existing framework. His three-point percentage was exceptional, his range was unusual, but the league still hadn't fully processed what he was doing because the volume wasn't there yet, and volume is what forces a paradigm to collapse. In 2015-16, Curry made 402 three-pointers,
Perfect capper for him. 9/10 of a second.
Becoming the first unanimous MVP in NBA history and setting a single-season record that still stands. He was making deep pull-up threes in transition, catch-and-shoot threes from the logo, off-the-dribble threes from distances where most players wouldn't even consider releasing the ball. And he was doing it at an efficiency that completely invalidated every assumption coaches and front offices had made about shot selection for the previous 30 years. Galileo wrote that the greatest obstacle to discovering the truth isn't ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. The NBA didn't struggle to accept Curry because it lacked information, it struggled because it already believed it knew how basketball worked. Defensive coordinators had entire systems built around the assumption that a shooter becomes less dangerous the farther he moves away from the basket. Close out on the three-point line, take away the corner three, force the ball handler into mid-range situations, and you've defended the three-point threat. This was the accepted model. What it didn't account for was a player whose effective shooting range between where other players' effective range ended.
Curry was very popular
When
in
Curry
South
comes
America.
off a screen
In
30
my opinion,
feet
more
from the
than
basket,
LeBron James,
closing on
but
him
now
is
it's LeBron
functionally
James.
impossible without leaving yourself catastrophic.
Really? He was like that in South America? I thought Curry was like only America. Like people from America, really. I didn't really think that's crazy.
Catastrophically out of position if he drives.
rocking
He's
with
made
Curry
more
like
three-pointers
that.
from beyond 30 feet than any player who's ever lived. Every defensive principle built on the assumption that distance equals safety was not just challenged by Curry, it was dismantled. Here's what Galileo understood that the Aristotelian establishment refused to accept. When an observation
When Curry
contradicts
was
your
prime,
model, the
he
answer
was
isn't to
popular.
explain away the observation.
okay, when he
The
was
answer is
winning
to
on the
revise
ring.
the model. The league, to its
When he was
credit,
winning on the
eventually did exactly
championship.
that. The transformation in how NBA teams approach offense over the last decade is directly traceable to what Curry forced everyone to confront. Teams that once ran half their offense through post-up players started clearing the paint and spacing the floor. Coaches who once treated
Yeah,
a
I know one
30-foot
of them
pull-up
ones
as
too,
a
but
bad
he not
shot
Curry.
started building entire offensive systems around creating that exact shot for their best shooter. Young players across every level of basketball started training from distances their predecessors would have considered wasteful. The revolution wasn't just about one player being exceptionally skilled, it was about one player revealing that the collective understanding of what constituted a good shot was built on assumptions that were never tested at the level Curry tested them. But here's where Galileo's warning gets specific. He didn't just warn us that accepted wisdom could be wrong, he warned us about the institutional resistance to anyone who proves it. The people who persecuted Galileo weren't stupid, they were invested. 2,000 years of scientific and theological infrastructure had been built around the Aristotelian model. Admitting Galileo was right didn't just mean updating a fact, it meant accepting that everything built on top of the wrong assumption needed to be re-examined. The NBA faced a version of this same crisis. Every defensive scheme, every draft evaluation framework, every analytical model that had been used to assess shooting value was suddenly exposed as incomplete. Teams that had passed on Curry, franchises that had built their rosters around the old orthodoxy, executives who had dismissed pull-up threes as undisciplined, none of them could admit in real time that they'd been wrong without also admitting the scale of what that mistake cost them. The franchise that drafted Steph Curry in 2009 had spent that better part of a decade in comfortable irrelevance. The Warriors of the late 2000s were not a destination team. They were not a major market powerhouse with decades of championship infrastructure. They were a lottery team in a building with declining attendance, and they took a skinny guard with ankle problems that genuinely threatened his career and handed him the keys. What did he do with them? He built something from nothing. He won a championship in 2015 before a single mercenary arrived to join the cause, and then won another one in 2022 after all the mercenaries had cycled through and departed. The Warriors are Steph's team in the same way that the atom was Galileo's domain. He didn't inherit a kingdom, he constructed the proof himself over years under conditions that were supposed to prevent exactly the result he produced. Compare that with every player who tried to manufacture the same outcome through a different method. Kevin Durant arrived in Golden State in 2016 to chase the ring that the system told him validated his entire career. He won it twice. He was a generational talent in his own right, physically perhaps the most gifted scoring wing the league has ever produced.
Yes.
But he didn't build anything. He joined the structure Curry built and collected the hardware.
Exactly that. He didn't build a goddamn thing. He left what he built in OKC to get a fucking ring. He sacrificed his goddamn legacy for a goddamn ring. Bro, that one ring KD would have won in OKC, That, you know that song Fuck KD? He would have been getting shouted out on songs and shit, bro. Whole city would have loved him and all type of shit. Sometimes you
Even
just
though
gotta
Curry
stay
can
down.
take 15 over and over shots he want, but he can. He earned his reps, he earned respect. When he starts throwing them up and if he misses you can't be mad. He Curry, but he is a smart player and has common sense on how to play.
Facts, that's real. You can't be mad. Ain't nobody gonna be mad. He can shoot a full court shot. People ain't even gonna be chirp. Like, I mean, half court shot. People ain't even gonna chirp. Cause that's Curry. He's better. He's probably gonna make that. Like, he's so innovative that he built the entire, like, he built the whole Warriors empire. The Warriors was nothing before Curry.
Where that structure produced.
And
Then he
he's
left.
one of the most
Then the
respected
structure kept
players
producing
ever.
hardware without him. That's not a criticism of Durant's talent. That's an observation about what legitimacy actually looks like when you trace it back to its source. Curry's championships don't require an asterisk because the system was his. Durant's required 3 of them. Giannis Antetokounmpo is another version of the citizen builder. He arrived in Milwaukee as an unknown teenager from Athens in a market so small that the realistic expectation for his tenure was that he'd develop, get good, and eventually leave for somewhere more significant. He stayed. He suffered through losing seasons and draft lottery nights and the constant noise about whether he'd ever win anything meaningful in Wisconsin. In 2021, he won them a championship that nobody in the NBA could challenge the legitimacy
That's
of because
respect.
the suffering was public and the loyalty was documented and everyone had watched him build it.
Giannis one ring weighs more than all of KD's.
Galileo would recognize something in both Curry and Giannis that he'd spent his life trying to demonstrate. Proof built through observation over time is the only kind of proof
Shit
that
like
holds.
this is crazy.
Now consider what the
That's
Galileo
fucking
parallel
insane.
reveals about the specific nature of Curry's achievement that the numbers alone can't capture. By the time Curry broke Ray Allen's all-time three-pointers made record in December 2021, he had 2,974 career threes.
The all-time three-point king in the NBA.
Number 2974.
By March 2025, he'd reached 4,000. That's more than 1,000 three-pointers in roughly 3 years, made at a pace that no other player has ever approached even briefly, let alone sustained across a stretch of seasons.
Three, he'll put up a three. There it is!
Curry had kids shooting threes just like Kobe, but honestly Curry obviously had more social media play than Kobe.
Truly the portrait of an artist.
He has 5
It went from, you know how we used to shoot the ball in the, well, I don't know about y'all, but when I was growing up, we used to shoot the ball we not ball, but we used to shoot a piece of paper into a trash can and say Kobe. Shit, I still say that. But now I hear like the little kids be like Curry. That shit is fire. Like the growing up and seeing that is,
seasons with 300 or more three-pointers made. Every other
Yeah.
player in
Crazy.
NBA history combined
I
has
know it
fewer
really
than
is.
that. He has 26 games with 10 or more three-pointers. The next 5 players on that list combined don't match his totals.
That's
These aren't
fucking
just
crazy.
impressive statistics. They're Galilean on the sense that they make the prior model of what was possible look like an artifact of ignorance rather than an accurate mapping of physical reality. In February 2025, Curry hit 12 three-pointers in a single game against the Orlando Magic. 12. On the same night.
on
Steph's
one
got 12 threes.
He hit a 51-foot shot to beat the halftime buzzer.
Half court, and it's good. A Curry moment in Boston.
A 51-foot shot from nearly mid-court, taken with the same mechanical composure that most players reserve for free throws. When Galileo dropped objects of different weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa
That
and
was
watched them land
exaggeration.
simultaneously, the crowd didn't
Niggas be
applaud the
taking a deep
physics.
breath and
They
all before the
questioned
free
the
throws. That's
experiment.
exaggeration.
They assumed something must be wrong with the setup because the result contradicted everything they believed. The people watching Curry release a basketball from 51 feet had the same fundamental reaction. Their framework had no room for what they were watching. The shot going in wasn't the problem. The problem was what it implied about everything they thought they understood. Here's the thing that Galileo understood
Curry
that the
don't
basketball
cry and
establishment
shit and no be
still
flopping
hasn't
and
fully
shit.
processed even now.
He is
When a
respected
single
by fans
experiment
and real
destroys your
skill.
model, the correct
Hey, that's
response is
real.
to discard the model, not to treat the experiment as an exception.
That's why Curry's
The
a
league
leader,
responded
bro.
to Curry by incorporating his
I
style rather
didn't mean
than
to call
by
you, bro,
understanding
but
what his style revealed about
that's
the
why Curry's
underlying
a leader.
physics of shooting efficiency. Teams started shooting more threes, yes,
Leaders don't
but
pout and
most
shit
of them
like
did it
that.
by finding shooters
Of
who
course it's
fit
gonna
the
happen.
traditional profile.
I done seen Curry getting his finish a few times. Whenever they get to the playoffs and stuff like that, they get shit done. He gets shit done.
Guys who could knock down catch and shoot threes
He
at
take the
reasonable
blame, too.
percentages
Like,
from
that's what
the
leaders be
standard
doing.
3-point distance. Almost nobody attacked the deeper question, which is whether the relationship between distance and efficiency that everyone assumes is a law is actually just a function of training methodology and biomechanical development that can be altered. Curry suggests it can be. He's been running that experiment publicly for 16 years, and the results keep coming back the same way. The question Galileo forced science to confront wasn't just whether his specific claims were correct, it was whether the entire epistemological framework of that scientific knowledge could survive the kind of empirical challenge he was mounting. Curry forces basketball to confront the same kind of question. If a player can shoot from 35 feet at 54% efficiency, where's the actual outer boundary of shooting range? The honest answer is that nobody knows, because nobody before Curry had the combination of mechanics, strength, and range training to find out. He didn't just break a record, he revealed that the record was an artifact of prior limitations and how the game was practiced and coached, not a ceiling imposed by the laws of physics themselves. The career three-point percentage tells part of the story. 42.
That's fucking crazy. That's crazy as shit, boy. I think almost 50% from the three. Curry a nigga, since he don't rely on his his body for real. Curry probably could play for another 5 years on some shit. Like 5-6 years.
0.4% across 16 seasons and over 10,000 attempts ranks in the top tier of all players who've ever taken a significant volume of threes. What makes that number extraordinary isn't the percentage itself, it's that his percentage exists in the context of the difficulty of the shots he's taking. The average NBA player taking 10,000 three-point attempts over a career would be selecting the most favorable looks available to him, corners and catch-and-shoot opportunities where the defense is slightly late. Curry's 10,000 attempts include a substantial portion of shots that other players in the league simply don't attempt at all, because their previous training had defined those shots as outside the range of reasonable basketball. He's maintaining a career percentage comparable to the most efficient volume shooters in the league history, while simultaneously attempting shots that are statistically classified in a different category of difficulty. It's as if Galileo had matched the accuracy of the most precise Aristotelian measurements while conducting experiments the Aristotelians had never thought to run. The streak deserves its own examination. From 2018 to 2023, Curry made at least one three-pointer in 268 consecutive games. That's nearly 5 full seasons. He also owns the second longest streak in league history at 157 games, a streak he set before the longer one. This means 2 of the 3 longest three-point streaks in the history of the NBA belong to the same player, separated by a period of continued excellence. A streak of 268 games is not a hot shooting run. It's a demonstration of sustained mechanical consistency operating at a level that's outside the normal distribution of human athletic performance. The comparison isn't to other great shooters, the comparison is to what Galileo was doing when he kept running the same experiments under different conditions and kept getting the same result. At some point, the repeated proof stops being a finding and becomes a law. Galileo spent his final years under house arrest, his books banned, his ideas formally condemned by the most powerful institutional authority on Earth. He was right about everything. The authority was wrong about everything. What Galileo warned us about wasn't just scientific error, it was the institutional cost of being the person whose existence makes the accepted framework untenable. Curry has paid a quieter version of that price his entire career, dismissed at the draft, doubted through injuries, told implicitly and explicitly by the structure of the game he played that what he was doing shouldn't work, that a 6'3" guard with fragile ankles couldn't be the best player on a dynasty. He kept running the experiment anyway. His 4,225 three-pointers, his unanimous MVP, his 4 championships, his record that grows further from Ray Allen's mark with every game he plays, they're not just basketball achievements, They're proof that the model was wrong. They always were.
Nah, it's a W video, bro.
Better know what you're doing when you're going on that mission. I know professional shooters and I get them niggas pissed. But for that drill, they walk down. My young niggas most so sick. I try to teach this bitch a lesson. That little bitches wouldn't list. I tired of lectures. Now I'm sending all these hoes to the tents. I put my city on new swag. Little bitch, check out my invention. When BR niggas get a bag, we heading straight to the dick. I'ma put some diamonds in my dick. Reach for my jewelry, I leave you crazy.